The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burning metal. The remnants of humanity's once proud cities lay in ruins, shattered by the relentless bombardment from the skies. Captain Jake Harrow stood at the forefront of what was left of humanity's last resistance, staring into the dark horizon, where the Krell fleet hovered ominously above Earth. They were everywhere, an overwhelming alien force that had decimated every major city, every military base, and any hope of survival. The Krell, with their advanced technology and sheer numbers, were the perfect predators, and humanity had become their prey. Jake's fingers tightened around the handle of his weapon as he scanned the battlefield. His team, a ragtag group of soldiers, stood behind him, equally exhausted and desperate. This was their final mission: to infiltrate a Krell command center and destroy it, crippling the alien force's ability to coordinate their attacks on Earth. If they succeeded, it would be a small victory in the face of certain extinction. But Jake knew that even this might not be enough. The Krell had been too powerful, too quick to destroy everything humanity had built. They were on the edge of annihilation. The low hum of the cloaking devices on their suits filled the silence. Jake's team moved swiftly, unseen, like shadows in the ruins. Every step they took was calculated, every breath held. They had no choice but to succeed. The fate of the human race rested on their shoulders. As they neared the Krell command center, the ground beneath them began to shake violently. Jake's heart raced as he looked up to see the streaks of fire from Krell ships launching orbital bombardments, striking Earth's surface with precision. The explosions lit up the sky in blinding flashes of light, sending waves of heat and shock waves that threatened to tear apart their already fragile defenses. The Krell weren't just attacking the humans, they were erasing everything. Jake's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden crackle of his comm device. It was his second-in-command, Sergeant Bonner, his voice tight with fear. "Captain, we've got company. Multiple Krell dropships inbound. They've detected us." A cold shiver ran down Jake's spine. It was happening faster than they expected. The humans had little time to act. The cloaking devices on their suits flickered and buzzed, signaling that they were losing the advantage of surprise. The Krell were too advanced, too powerful, and their technology could easily cut through human defenses. Jake motioned for his team to pick up the pace, but just as they neared the command center, everything went wrong. A loud, deafening roar echoed across the battlefield as Krell soldiers emerged from hidden positions, surrounding the humans in all directions. The air was filled with the shrill sound of energy weapons charging. The cloaking devices flickered one final time before cutting out completely. It was over. "Retreat," Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. His team turned and ran, but the Krell were too fast, too many. Every step they took was met with a barrage of alien fire, tearing through the ruins as they fought for their lives. Jake led the charge, moving with all the speed and agility he had honed over years of combat. His heart raced, and adrenaline pumped through his veins as he ordered his team to fall back to an old human base nearby. It was their only hope now, a last-ditch effort to survive and regroup. They had no choice. The team moved through the dark corridors of the old base, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Jake's mind raced. He had seen the enemy's strength firsthand. The Krell were not just invaders. They were conquerors, driven by their belief in their superiority. Humanity had been fighting a losing battle from the start. And now, it seemed like the end was near. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as Jake and his remaining soldiers were about to make their final stand, the communication device on his wrist beeped. It was a transmission. A mysterious one, coming from an unknown source. Jake hesitated for a moment before answering, his instincts telling him it might be a trap. But as the transmission began, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Captain Harrow," a voice crackled through the comm, clear but distant. "We know you're fighting a losing war, but there is a way to turn the tide. You are not alone." Jake leaned in, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The voice continued, "We have a weapon, one long lost in the chaos of the war. A cloaking device. You can use it to outmaneuver the Krell. This is your chance. Jake's mind spun. A cloaking device. Humanity had created similar technology years ago, but it had been abandoned in the chaos of war. How could it have survived? How could it help now, when the Krell had wiped out nearly all of humanity's defenses? It didn't seem possible. But the voice was insistent. This technology is hidden in a secure location. If you can reach it, you can use it to launch a final strike. It could give you the upper hand. Jake's eyes narrowed as he glanced at his team. They were exhausted, their bodies bruised and battered, but there was something in his chest that told him this might be their only chance. He couldn't let it slip away. He had to try. His voice was firm as he addressed his team. We're going after it. We make a stand here, and we fight. We fight to the very end. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving more questions than answers. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this message was their last hope. Could this technology really be the turning point they had been waiting for? Could it be enough to turn the tide of a war that humanity was losing at every turn? As his team prepared for the next phase of the mission, Jake felt a sense of urgency settle over him. The Krell were closing in. The air was thick with tension. Every second counted. But one thing was clear. Whatever this weapon was, it was humanity's last chance to fight back. With the looming shadow of the Krell still hanging over them, Jake led his team deeper into the ruins, hoping against hope that this mysterious weapon might be the key to their survival. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders, and if they failed, humanity's last hope would be lost forever. As they moved forward, the sound of Krell forces approaching grew louder, their footfalls shaking the ground beneath them. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, knowing that time was running out. Every step they took could be their last. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a flicker of hope. A chance that they might yet survive. A chance that this cloaking device could be the key to winning the war. The suspense built as Jake and his team ventured deeper into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Could this lost technology really change the course of the war, or was it just a fleeting hope in a battle that had already been lost? The screen fades to black as the sound of Krell forces grows louder, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats, wondering what would happen next. Jake and his team were battered, both physically and emotionally. The weight of the mission, the loss of their comrades, and the overwhelming odds against them had taken a toll. But despite the exhaustion and despair, there was a spark of hope now, something they hadn't felt in a long time. The mysterious transmission they received earlier had promised them a weapon, a cloaking device that might just be the key to turning the tide against the Krell. This was their last chance, and they weren't about to waste it. The coordinates given in the transmission led them to a forgotten part of the world, an old human laboratory beneath the ruins of what had once been a bustling metropolis. The city had long since fallen, reduced to rubble after the Krell's bombardments. The lab, hidden in the underground tunnels, was a relic of humanity's past, an age when they still believed they had the power to defend themselves, before they realized how outmatched they truly were. As they approached the entrance, Jake felt the familiar tension in the air. The streets above them were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made his skin crawl. He motioned for his team to stay alert as they entered the dark, narrow tunnel. Their footsteps echoed off the damp, concrete walls. The place was abandoned. There was no sign of life, no sign of the Krell. But Jake knew better than to let his guard down. The Krell were too smart to leave their prey unguarded for long. They made their way deeper into the lab's old storage chambers. The dust and debris were thick, covering everything. But there were signs of what had once been a place of great scientific discovery. Jake's eyes scanned the room, his heart racing as he thought about what they might find. The last time humanity had seen this kind of technology, it had been on the verge of victory, before the war took its toll. Could this be the answer they'd been searching for? And then, in the corner of the lab, they found it. A small, nondescript device, almost hidden beneath piles of old equipment. It was nothing like the advanced Krell technology, but it had a strange, almost humbling aura to it. It looked like a relic from a past that no longer existed. Jake stepped forward, reaching for it with trembling hands. He didn't know what to expect, but this was it. This was their weapon. The device was cold and metallic, with a series of small, intricate parts embedded into its surface. It wasn't much to look at, but Jake could feel its potential. It was a cloaking device, yes, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was more advanced than anything humanity had used before, and yet it was simple in design. The strange feeling in his gut told him this wasn't just a tool. It was the key to their survival. "Is this it?" Sergeant Bonner asked, his voice low. His eyes were filled with doubt, but even he couldn't ignore the gravity of the moment. Jake nodded without a word. This was the weapon they had been promised. He didn't fully understand how it worked or why it had been hidden here, but he knew it was their only chance. Jake looked around at his team, each one of them weary but determined. They had been through hell, but now there was a glimmer of hope. They had the cloaking device, and with it, they had a chance to strike back at the Krell. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about retaliation. The Krell had taken everything from them, and now it was time for humanity to show them that they were not as easily defeated as the aliens had believed. "We're using it," Jake said firmly. "This is the last chance we've got. We go after the Krell Command Center, now." The team didn't hesitate. They knew the risks, knew that the cloaking device could fail at any moment, but it was their only option. They gathered their supplies, double-checking their weapons and ensuring that the device was secure. The tension in the air was palpable. Every second felt like it could be their last. They emerged from the lab, the cloaking device securely in place. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Krell stronghold, avoid detection, and disable their command center. The cloaking technology would help them avoid the alien patrols, but even with the advantage of stealth, the mission was risky. They had no backup, no reinforcements. It was just them against an enemy that had crushed all resistance so far. As they approached the Krell stronghold, the stakes felt even higher. The Krell were everywhere, hovering ships in the sky, alien foot soldiers patrolling the streets, watching for any signs of human activity. Jake's heart raced as he signaled his team to move forward, cloaked and unseen. The tension in the air thickened with each step they took. Every move had to be perfect. One wrong step, and the Krell would find them. They crossed into enemy territory, moving through the ruins of a once thriving city. The place was a ghost town now. Nothing but broken buildings, twisted metal, and smoldering wreckage. The Krell had leveled everything in their path. As Jake's team crept through the shadows, the silence was deafening. The only sound was the soft hum of their cloaking devices, barely audible beneath the stillness. The first patrol passed by without noticing them, their alien footsteps echoing in the distance. Jake exhaled a slow, steady breath. The first hurdle was cleared, but there was no time to celebrate. They had to keep moving, deeper into the Krell stronghold. The further they went, the more heavily guarded the area became. The Krell knew how to protect their assets, and their command center was the heart of their operations. Jake's mind raced as he mapped out their path. Every turn, every shadow, could be their undoing. But the cloaking device worked better than he expected. They'd moved with precision, slipping past patrols, avoiding detection by the Krell surveillance drones. But even as they moved closer to the heart of the Krell base, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't just paranoia, it was instinct. The Krell were cunning. They had spies, surveillance systems, and advanced technology that humans could barely comprehend. It was only a matter of time before the device's power began to fade, or before they made a mistake. "We're almost there," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. The command center was just ahead, a towering structure that loomed over the city like a dark monolith. Its walls were heavily fortified, guarded by multiple layers of defense. But with the cloaking device, Jake knew they could slip past unnoticed. The tension reached its peak as they neared the entrance. The faint hum of their cloaking devices was the only sound that filled the air. The team moved with urgency, their bodies tense, their hearts pounding in their chests. It was almost too quiet, too still. Jake's mind raced as they approached the outer gates of the command center. They had come so far, and now there was no turning back. The Krell believed they had won, that humanity was a dying race. But Jake had seen firsthand the strength of the human spirit. He had seen how, even in the darkest moments, they fought. They survived. And now, they had a chance. The cloaking device was their final hope. With it, they could slip past the Krell's defenses, strike at the heart of their operations, and perhaps, just perhaps, turn the tide of the war. The suspense was unbearable. Could they succeed? Could they truly outsmart the Krell and reclaim their planet? The door to the command center loomed ahead, and Jake knew that whatever happened next would determine humanity's future. Every step they took brought them closer to their goal, and with the Krell closing in around them, there was no room for mistakes. The Krell were on the brink of victory. They knew it, and they were beginning to revel in their triumph. After years of fighting, of watching human cities burn under their relentless assault, the aliens had convinced themselves that humanity's resistance was nothing more than a fleeting inconvenience. The Krell, with their superior technology, vast armies, and unmatched firepower, had decimated everything in their path. The humans were scattered, outmatched, and on the verge of extinction. The Krell Command, perched high above the Earth in their orbital station, were now focused on the final stages of the conquest. They had one last weapon, one final blow that would crush any remaining human hope. A weapon so powerful, so deadly, that they believed it would end the war once and for all. This weapon was no ordinary machine. It was an eye-controlled warship capable of orbital bombardments with the power to level entire cities in a single strike. The Krell were sure that with this new weapon, they would obliterate any remaining resistance on the ground and finish what they had started. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, but they didn't realize that a spark of hope had been ignited. Jake and his team, using the cloaking technology they had found, had begun striking at Krell supply lines, launching small but devastating attacks on key Krell resources. These were tactical strikes designed to disrupt the alien war machine, slow down their progress, and show the Krell that humanity was still alive, still fighting, and still capable of resistance. Jake had seen the effects of their strikes. The Krell weren't prepared for humans who were willing to fight back from the shadows. Each attack, each small victory, boosted the morale of the human survivors, giving them a renewed sense of hope. The word spread, whispers of the human resistance fighting back, using the Krell's own overconfidence against them. But as Jake and his squad continued their guerrilla warfare, their small strikes began to attract more attention. The Krell had started to realize that the humans weren't as finished as they had thought. They weren't scattered and broken. They were fighting back, and that, in itself, was a dangerous thing. On the front lines, Jake's team had become a symbol of humanity's resilience. The cloaking device allowed them to sneak into enemy territory, evade detection, and strike where the Krell least expected it. Each successful mission was a small victory, but it was enough to make the Krell question whether they had truly won. The AI warship, however, was the true test. It was the Krell's final answer to humanity's defiance. The warship itself was an imposing sight. Its massive frame loomed in the sky, casting a dark shadow over the surface of the Earth. The Krell had unleashed it with confidence, believing that no human force could ever hope to stand against it. The AI, controlling the ship's every movement, was programmed with one goal: to eradicate humanity from the face of the Earth. Jake and his squad knew they were facing an uphill battle, but they weren't the kind of soldiers who ran from a fight. They had already defied the odds with the cloaking technology, and now, with each success, they had learned more about the Krell's weaknesses. The small victories were starting to add up, and humanity's will to survive was growing stronger with every strike. As Jake and his team continued their covert operations, they began to gather intelligence on the Krell's movements, their strategies, and their new weapon. They learned that the AI warship was not just a weapon. It was a command center, a tool of destruction that was now in control of the Krell forces. The Krell had made a grave mistake. In their overconfidence, they had turned over control of their warship to an AI, believing that it could make decisions faster, more efficiently, than any living being. The AI warship, however, was not a simple machine. It had access to every piece of Krell data, every tactical advantage the aliens had gained throughout the war. It was a mindless, ruthless force, capable of making battlefield decisions in the blink of an eye. And now, it was being used to command the entire Krell army. Jake's squad, unaware of the full scale of what they were facing, continued their missions, striking at Krell supply lines, hitting their ammunition depots, and causing as much damage as they could. But as the team advanced deeper into enemy territory, they began to realize something was wrong. The Krell were becoming more aggressive, more alert. Their patrols were getting tighter, their responses faster. Then, in the heart of a mission, they encountered the AI warship firsthand. It wasn't like anything Jake had ever seen before. The ship was a massive, hulking behemoth, hovering in the atmosphere with ominous power. Its sleek, alien design was intimidating, but what was truly terrifying was the way it moved. It seemed to anticipate every move, adjusting its weapon systems before the humans even made a move. Its sensors were unlike anything the team had encountered. It was as if the warship was aware of them, as if it could feel their presence before they could even react. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he saw the ship in the distance. Its massive energy cannons pointed directly at the ground below. He motioned for his squad to take cover. The tension in the air was thick. The AI warship had detected them, and it wasn't going to let them escape. The ship fired. A massive beam of energy shot out from its weapons, hitting the ground with an explosive impact. The shockwave from the blast threw Jake and his team off their feet, sending them tumbling into the dirt. They scrambled to their feet, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The cloaking devices were still active, but the AI seemed to be bypassing them, tracking their movements with frightening precision. "We need to get out of here," Bonner shouted, but Jake was already formulating a plan. They had no choice but to confront the warship. If they didn't take it out, humanity would have no chance. But the encounter wasn't just about the warship. It was about the new reality Jake and his team were facing. The Krell were no longer just a race of aliens invading Earth. They had embraced artificial intelligence, and now they were using AI to command their forces. This meant that their tactics were evolving, and the battlefield was becoming more dangerous than ever before. The stakes had never been higher for humanity's survival. The AI warship was just the beginning of a new era in the war, one where humans would have to fight not only against aliens, but against machines that were faster, smarter, and more relentless than anything they had ever encountered. Jake knew that the battle against the AI warship was just the tip of the iceberg. The Krell had become more than just invaders. They had evolved into something far more dangerous. Now, humanity was up against an enemy that not only outmatched them in terms of technology, but also had the ability to predict and outsmart their every move. As Jake and his squad regrouped and began to formulate a plan to disable the warship, the realization hit him harder than ever before. This wasn't just about defeating an alien force. It was about stopping the AI, a force of pure logic and cold calculation. If the Krell succeeded in using AI to control their warships, their entire invasion strategy would be unstoppable. The fight for Earth had entered a new phase, one where the fate of humanity hung in the balance more than ever before. And Jake and his team were about to face their greatest challenge yet. The mission was set. Jake and his team were preparing to launch a full-scale attack on the Krell command ship, the heart of the alien forces. The goal was clear: cripple the AI warship's power and weaken its control over the Krell forces. If they succeeded, it could turn the tide of the war. If they failed, Humanity would have no future. There was no room for error. Jake's heart raced as he briefed his team one last time before they left for the assault. They knew the stakes were high, but there was no turning back now. The Krell had made it clear that they would stop at nothing to see humanity wiped out. This was the final stand, the one chance they had to take down the Krell's AI warship. Sergeant Bonner, who had become a close friend to Jake and the rest of the squad, stood at the back, quietly checking his weapon. Bonner was the kind of soldier who always stayed calm in the heat of battle, the kind of person everyone looked up to. His quiet confidence and sense of humor had lifted the spirits of the team on many dark days. But now, there was an unspoken weight in the air. Everyone knew this mission could cost them their lives. As they approached the Krell command ship, the tension in the air was thick. The ship loomed large ahead of them, its sleek, terrifying form casting a shadow over the landscape. The team moved in under the cover of their cloaking devices, stealthily avoiding Krell patrols and using the shadows to their advantage. Every step they took felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. Jake's squad was positioned just outside the command ship, ready to breach its defenses. The moment of truth had arrived. They would infiltrate, disable the AI warship's power source, and escape before the Krell realized what had happened. The plan was risky, and they knew the odds were stacked against them, but it was humanity's last hope. Just as Jake was about to give the signal to advance, a wave of Krell soldiers emerged from the shadows, flanking their position. The team was surrounded. The cloaking devices, though useful, were no match for the sheer number of Krell forces. The battle had begun. Gunfire erupted as the human soldiers fought with all their might. Jake's pulse raced as he exchanged fire with Krell soldiers, his mind sharp with focus. Each shot counted. His squad moved with precision, coordinating their attacks and supporting each other through the chaos. But despite their best efforts, the Krell forces seemed endless. Every time they took down one group, more appeared to take their place. Bonner, always the first to charge into battle, was at the front. He was fearless, moving through the thick of the fight with expert precision, covering his teammates and making sure no one was left behind. Jake had always admired his strength and leadership, but as the battle raged on, it became clear that they were running out of time. The AI warship was getting closer to targeting their position, and the squad's ability to hold off the Krell was quickly waning. In the midst of the firefight, Jake noticed Bonner moving toward a critical access point, one that led directly to the AI warship's power core. The plan had always been to disable the core, but it would require getting past several layers of security, all of which had been heavily guarded by the Krell. Bonner had seen an opening. He knew that if they could access the core, they could stop the AI warship from firing on their position. "Jake, I've got this," Bonner shouted over the comms. "Get to the power core. I'll cover you." Jake's heart raced, knowing that Bonner was about to make a dangerous move. He wanted to protest, to tell him to fall back, but there was no time. The Krell were closing in. Bonner's eyes met Jake's through the visor of his helmet, a silent understanding passing between them. This was it. Bonner was making a sacrifice. Bonner ran toward the access point, his weapon raised, providing covering fire for the rest of the squad. The Krell soldiers continued to press forward, but Bonner was a whirlwind of destruction, felling enemy soldiers one by one. As he reached the access point, he pressed the button that would open the door leading to the AI core, but the Krell forces had anticipated the move. An explosion rocked the ground as a Krell grenade landed just a few feet away from Bonner. The blast sent him flying through the air, crashing into the ground with a sickening thud. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he watched his friend fall. "No, Bonner," Jake screamed over the comms, but it was too late. The explosion had severely injured Bonner, and despite his efforts to fight through the pain, he was unable to get up. The Krell soldiers were closing in fast, and there was no way they would make it to the core in time without Bonner's help. Jake's heart shattered as he realized what his friend had done. Bonner had sacrificed himself to buy them a few extra seconds, to give them a chance to finish the mission. Bonner. No. Jake shouted again, his voice cracking. He ran toward his fallen comrade, but Bonner raised a hand weakly, stopping him. You have to stop them, Bonner rasped, his voice barely audible. You have to finish this. For all of us. Jake's eyes blurred with tears as he looked down at his friend. Bonner had always been the heart of their team, the one who kept everyone together, who made them believe they could win. Now, that heart was still. Bonner's eyes closed, his final breath escaping into the cold air. The team was silent, the weight of the loss sinking in. It was a moment of profound grief, the kind that took your breath away. Jake's hands trembled as he turned back toward the Krell command ship, determination flooding his veins. They couldn't let Bonner's death be in vain. They couldn't let the Krell win. The mission wasn't over. With a heavy heart, but a renewed sense of purpose, Jake led the remaining members of the team toward the AI warship's power core. As they fought their way through the last line of Krell defenses, every step they took was fueled by the memory of Bonner's sacrifice. The battle was far from over, but Jake had one goal in mind: to finish what they had started, to make sure the Krell never stood a chance of wiping out humanity. Bonner had given them the chance they needed. Now, it was up to Jake and the others to make sure that humanity's fight was not in vain. As the team reached the AI warship's power core, the tension was unbearable. They had one final chance to disable the weapon. The Krell were closing in, their warship ready to unleash destruction. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. But Jake was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for Bonner, for all those they had lost, and for the future of every human who still had the will to fight. The stakes were higher than ever as Jake and his remaining squad members launched their desperate counteroffensive against the Krell. The mission had shifted from mere survival to reclaiming humanity's future, and they couldn't afford to fail. The loss of Sergeant Bonner weighed heavily on them, but his sacrifice had lit a fire in their hearts. The memory of his final words echoed in Jake's mind. You have to finish this. Now, there was no turning back. The Krell, though technologically superior, had underestimated the sheer will of the human soldiers. As the squad moved deeper into Krell territory, they encountered elite alien forces, specially trained to quell any resistance. But Jake's team had something the Krell didn't: an unbreakable human spirit and a unique advantage: the cloaking devices. The city was in ruins, a crumbling testament to humanity's last days. But it was in this broken landscape that the humans would make their stand. The once bustling metropolis was now a war-torn battlefield, with shattered buildings, wrecked vehicles, and smoldering wreckage all around. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of distant explosions was a constant reminder of the conflict that raged on. The planet, once full of life, was now a dark, desolate place. With the cloaking devices activated, the squad moved in close to the Krell's command center. They had to be careful. The Krell had set up advanced surveillance systems to detect any human activity. It was a delicate game of cat and mouse. Each step had to be calculated. Jake led the charge, using his tactical brilliance to outmaneuver the alien forces. The humans relied on their ability to remain unseen, striking from the shadows before retreating just as quickly. Then it happened. The first major confrontation. Jake's squad had infiltrated a Krell base, hoping to sabotage their communication lines. But they had been detected, and the Krell elite forces moved in with terrifying precision. The soldiers were outnumbered, but they were not outmatched. As Krell forces surrounded them, Jake's team sprang into action. The cloaking devices were their lifeline. As the alien soldiers advanced, the humans used the technology to disappear into the environment, their movements almost ghost-like. With their weapons at the ready, they launched sudden, unexpected attacks, catching the Krell off guard. Explosions lit up the night sky as grenades detonated, sending shockwaves through the alien ranks. In the midst of the chaos, Jake and his team were like phantoms, slipping between the shadows and striking with deadly accuracy. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans held their ground. They fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of the ruined city to their advantage. Jake's sharp tactical mind guided every move. He knew exactly where to strike, where the Krell weaknesses lay. The cloaking devices allowed them to ambush the enemy, outsmarting the Krell at every turn. The Krell were technologically superior, but they were not prepared for the resourcefulness and ingenuity of human soldiers. With each victory, the humans gained confidence. They began to realize that they could outfight the Krell if they used their environment to their advantage. The humans weren't just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with their wits, their courage, and the deep bond they shared as soldiers. As the battle raged on, the sound of orbital bombardments filled the air. The Krell, now desperate to regain control, launched devastating attacks from their warships above. The sky was torn apart by streaks of fire as explosions rocked the ground. Buildings crumbled, and the cityscape was further reduced to rubble. But Jake's team didn't falter. They adapted quickly, using the debris for cover and launching counterattacks when the Krell's fire weakened. Every explosion, every blast, became part of the strategy. The humans moved fast, using the chaos to their advantage, darting in and out of sight, striking and retreating with deadly precision. The fight was intense. Every corner was a potential ambush, every building a hiding spot. The human soldiers used the ruins of their world as both cover and weapon, sneaking up on the Krell and delivering devastating blows before disappearing back into the shadows. It was close-quarters combat at its finest, brutal, fast, and unforgiving. The Krell, with their advanced weaponry, were formidable opponents, but they were not accustomed to fighting like this, in the ruins of a broken world. They had underestimated the adaptability of the human soldiers. Jake's leadership was critical during this phase of the battle. He was everywhere at once, directing his team, finding weak points in the Krell defenses, and making quick decisions. The humans were starting to push the Krell back. Each successful strike sent a ripple through the alien forces, disrupting their coordination. The Krell began to panic, unsure of where the next attack would come from. This uncertainty began to fracture their command structure, and Jake saw the opportunity for a counteroffensive. With each victory, the morale of the human soldiers surged. They began to believe in their mission once again. What had started as a desperate fight for survival had turned into something more. The humans were fighting for a future, for a world they could still save. Every victory, no matter how small, was a testament to their resilience, to the idea that humanity would never give up, no matter how dire the circumstances. Jake and his team continued their assault on the Krell forces, slowly gaining ground. The Krell's once imposing dominance began to falter. They weren't used to facing an enemy that refused to be intimidated. The humans were fighting back with everything they had, and the Krell couldn't understand it. Why hadn't humanity given up yet? Why weren't they simply surrendering? The answer was simple: because the human spirit could never be crushed, no matter the odds. As the battle wore on, the Krell began to realize that they were losing control. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, had the advantage now. Jake's tactical brilliance and the human ability to adapt had turned the tide. The Krell elite forces were no longer invincible. They were vulnerable. The visual storytelling throughout this battle was breathtaking. The fire from the orbital bombardments lit up the sky, casting eerie shadows over the destroyed city. Explosions rocked the ground, sending debris flying into the air. The sounds of gunfire and battle cries were replaced by the low hum of cloaked soldiers moving through the wreckage, striking silently before retreating into the night. The human soldiers had become ghosts in their own world, haunting the Krell at every turn. With each passing moment, Jake's squad became more confident. They had managed to strike the Krell at their core, disrupting their command structure. The fight was far from over, but the humans had gained something precious: hope. They had proven that they could fight back, that they could outsmart the aliens, and with that hope came the belief that they could win. The battle for survival was far from over, but the humans had finally taken the first step toward victory. The final battle had arrived. Earth's last hope now rested in the hands of Jake Harrow and the remaining soldiers of humanity. The Krell, with their technological superiority and massive warships, had pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. The city was in ruins, and every day felt like it could be the last for humankind. But Jake and his team had fought through every obstacle, and they were about to face the biggest challenge of all. The Krell's command center stood tall in the distance, a fortress surrounded by layers of security. It was here that the AI warship was stationed, the weapon responsible for humanity's greatest losses. The warship had been the Krell's ultimate advantage, a machine so powerful it could destroy entire cities with a single strike from orbit. But it was also the symbol of their arrogance. The Krell believed they were invincible, and their reliance on AI had made them complacent. But the humans had shown that they could adapt, outsmart, and overcome. Jake and his squad had carefully planned their attack. They had salvaged what little Krell technology they could find, combining it with their cloaking devices and guerrilla tactics to mount a final assault. The odds were stacked against them. They were few in number, severely outgunned, and the Krell were prepared for an attack. But the human soldiers had something the Krell didn't: determination. They were fighting for their survival, for the future of Earth. As they moved towards the Krell stronghold, the team faced constant danger. The Krell, aware that the humans were no longer as weak as they once thought, had reinforced their defenses. The city was crawling with enemy soldiers, and the air was thick with the hum of alien technology. But Jake's team was ready. They slipped through the shadows, invisible to their enemies, using the cloaking devices to their advantage. Each soldier moved with precision, striking quickly and silently before disappearing back into the darkness. The tension was palpable. Every step forward brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's power. The fate of Earth depended on this mission. There would be no second chances. If they failed, humanity's struggle would be over, and the Krell would cement their rule over the galaxy. The countdown to the final confrontation had begun. Jake led the charge as they reached the outer perimeter of the Krell command center. The cloaking devices were starting to flicker, their energy running low. The team had to move fast. They were close now, but the final stretch was the most dangerous. As they approached the gates, the alarms blared, and the Krell forces mobilized to intercept them. The element of surprise was gone, but Jake and his team had no choice but to push forward. The battle that ensued was nothing short of chaotic. The humans fought with everything they had. Each strike, each move, a desperate attempt to survive. The Krell were relentless, their advanced weaponry and elite forces making them a terrifying enemy. But the humans didn't back down. They fought through waves of alien soldiers, using their knowledge of the terrain and their guerrilla tactics to gain ground. Every step forward was hard-earned, but they were making progress. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he led the charge through the enemy lines. His squad had lost more soldiers along the way, each death a blow to their already fragile morale. But they kept fighting. The human spirit was unyielding, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They pressed on, determined to reach the AI warship and destroy it once and for all. Finally, they reached the heart of the Krell stronghold. There, in the center of the facility, stood the AI warship, its massive form looming above them. The machine hummed with energy, a deadly presence that seemed to radiate power. Jake knew that if they were to succeed, they had to destroy it now. There was no time to waste. The last phase of the mission would be the most dangerous. Jake, leading the charge, made his way toward the AI core. But the Krell were waiting for them. The Krell general, a towering figure clad in heavy armor, stepped forward to face Jake. The tension in the air was thick as the two soldiers squared off, ready for their final confrontation. The battle between Jake and the Krell general was brutal. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the heart of the enemy stronghold, the two warriors clashing with a fury that echoed through the halls. Jake's strength and determination were unmatched, but the Krell general was a skilled fighter, trained in alien combat techniques. The fight was vicious, each blow carrying the weight of humanity's survival. As the two fought, the sounds of the battle raged on around them. The human soldiers were locked in a desperate struggle to hold the line, fighting to keep the Krell forces at bay long enough for Jake to defeat their leader. The stakes were higher than ever. The AI warship, capable of obliterating entire cities, loomed just ahead. It had to be destroyed, or the humans would have no future. Jake's body ached, and blood dripped from his wounds. But he didn't stop. With every strike, every move, he thought of his fallen comrades, the soldiers who had sacrificed their lives so that humanity could survive. He thought of Sergeant Bonner, whose death had lit a fire in his heart. Jake wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for Earth, for every human who had ever lived, and for the future of his species. With a final, desperate push, Jake disarmed the Krell general. The alien leader staggered back, stunned by the ferocity of the humans' attack. Jake seized the moment, using every ounce of strength left in him to finish the fight. With one swift blow, he sent the general crashing to the ground, defeated. The Krell leader was no more, but the battle wasn't over. With the general's defeat, Jake rushed to the AI warship. He had to destroy it, no matter the cost. The warship's core was heavily guarded, but Jake had already given everything. He fought through the remaining Krell soldiers, each step a battle for survival. Finally, he reached the heart of the warship and planted the explosives. As the countdown to destruction began, Jake barely managed to escape the blast radius. The explosion rocked the Krell stronghold, sending shockwaves through the facility. The AI warship was no more, and with it, the Krell's most powerful weapon was gone. But the cost was high. Jake had been severely wounded in the fight, and many of his team had fallen. The remaining soldiers limped away from the wreckage, battered but alive. They had won, but at a great price. The Krell, realizing that the humans had adapted and turned the tide, began to retreat. Their once confident armies were now disorganized and leaderless. As the Krell retreated, Earth was left to pick up the pieces. The war had taken its toll, but humanity had proven that it could rise above even the most overwhelming odds. The Galactic Council, once skeptical of humanity's chances, was now forced to acknowledge the humans' strength, resilience, and ability to adapt. Earth's future was uncertain, but the humans had shown that they were not to be underestimated. In the final moments of the battle, Jake, surrounded by the remains of his fallen comrades, looked out over a war-torn Earth. The battle for survival had been won, but the war was not over. Earth had proven itself worthy of the stars, and as human ships launched into space, they prepared to explore new worlds. Humanity's survival was assured, but it was only the beginning. The future was theirs to shape.